Hello. It's time for us to test our equipment. We are in the middle of a storm, lightning and thunder, and the computer has gone off a couple of times in the last few minutes. So please let us know if you can hear me and if you can see me. And if the computer goes off, well, it is because of the storm. But right now the computer seems to be working, so let me know if the sound is correct. Too loud, too soft, or just right. Please. Wow, it's quite late.
It's okay.
Okay, sound is good.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like people. Wait one moment.
Can you move the plastic up a little bit?
Second.
Yeah, that's good.
And it won't hurt the wood?
No.
Okay. And the sound is good?
Yes. You're good.
Okay, we are ready to start. And I want to remind you that we are talking about the third realm. The first and second realms are public and private. If something has existence, if it exists in the public realm, then it has material existence, something that can be measured, weighed, exposed to instruments, pointed to, touched. Those things are in the public realm. And science sees this as the only realm. It is the natural world. Then we have the private realm, which is in the brain of an individual, something which takes place in my mind, has existence only for me. It is private. And for practical purposes, someone could say it doesn't exist at all, or certainly that it's not very important. What happens only in my mind, my personal opinion. And then there is a third realm, a realm which cannot be measured. It is not part of the natural world. It is not part of what scientists see as the realm of inquiry for scientists, but it is nonetheless real. This may be the realm that Aristotle pointed to with his model concepts, the ideal horse. The third realm is the realm where a poem exists. It's a place where the ideas of the poet can be put out there so that other readers can view it, think about it, and interact. It is a realm of interaction that has no material existence. And the question also arises, where is language? In what sense does language exist? This is generally some of the philosophical content that Levis is dealing with in the portion of the reading that we look at today, and also last week, and this is the whole tract that we are looking at right now. So these are the general ideas. Let me begin reading on page 37, and I will begin with the first full paragraph, beginning with the phrase, "Of the child," she says. We studied this paragraph last week, and I will continue through into the newer material. So, I will read page 37. right now. Of the child, she says, virtually, that it is able to grow into full humanity because it lives in a fully human world, a world shaped by all kinds of human value judgments and informed by distinctively human values. The total community to which she refers, properly considered, both the actual innumerable community which, as bearer of cultural tradition, is its effective presence, and the wider human community, transcending statistical fact, to which, by participating in a living culture, one belongs, having access to the profit of many centuries of human experience. Moving on. I'm afraid that I failed to satisfy in all this the criterion of logical and clear, though to me my logic seems all right. But the complexities and subtleties of the real and fundamental must sometimes be considered closely and in depth. And it turns out then that they tend to defy rationality, the rationality of either or. Some, indeed, of the essential defiant truths, for instance, that regarding the mode of existence in which a poem is there, are not difficult to recognize. Yet, there are intellectually energetic persons on whom, in default of the development in them of any strong interest in poetry, the logic that might have made awareness of the third realm potent in their thought will hardly have much cogency. Okay, let's begin. At the beginning. I am afraid that I failed to satisfy in all this the criterion of logical and clear, though to me my logic seems all right. I wonder if you understand the phrase, in all this. In all this is referring to the argument he has been making in the preceding paragraphs. He is afraid that his point is not crystal clear, and especially that it does not conform to an either-or paradigm of logic. Something is either public or private. It is either real or it is in the realm of the imaginary. He fears that his hypothesis of the third realm and of different modes of existence do not conform to this paradigm, though it seems to him that his logic is all right. So Levis is not confessing to being illogical. He is saying that his perspective on reality will not fit into an either-or paradigm. It requires a third category. But the complexities and subtleties of the real and fundamental must sometimes be considered closely and in depth. And it turns out, then, that they tend to defy the rationality of either or. Okay, I was just explaining that sentence. Let's see if there's anything else. The complexities and subtleties of the real and fundamental. The real and fundamental means the entire set of that which is real and fundamental. And so Levis is underscoring the fact that in the third realm you have a branch of reality and of the fundamental nature of existence that defies either or. What does it mean to defy? Usually the word defy means to not obey an authority. If the police tell you, move away from the sidewalk, and you step onto the sidewalk, you have defied the police. It is an in-your-face refusal to obey. But in this context, when we say something defies rationality, we mean it is not rational. And if it is defying the rationality of either or, it means it is not conforming to that set of options. It is insisting on being in a different category. And do you understand the phrase, it turns out then? It turns out means the result is. When I say, how did your project turn out? I mean, did your project finish well or did it go badly? If I say, how did the movie turn out? I mean, what was the ending? So in this case, it turns out that when you examine in depth the real and fundamental, you discover that it is neither in the public realm nor merely private. It requires a third dimension. So, in depth means look under the surface, look deeply at something. Andreski, for example, has not looked in depth into his own assumptions. His assumption being that the naturalistic worldview is sufficient. That the naturalistic worldview is enough to answer all of the questions of reality that a thinking person has in his mind. So, when it says they tend to defy rationality, if something tends to do something else, it means it often does it, but not always. So some of the items in the category of real and fundamental do not defy the either-or criteria. Some items fit nicely into a black and white, public or private category, but many tend to fit into a third category. So they tend to do this, not 100%. It means usually. All right. Though to me my logic seems all right, the complexities and subtleties of the real and fundamental must sometimes be considered closely and in depth. And it turns out then that they tend to defy the rationality of either or. Some, indeed, of the essential defiant truths, for instance, that regarding the mode of existence in which a poem is there, are not difficult to recognize. Let's look at that sentence. Some, indeed, of the essential defiant truths. Indeed suggests that he is giving more information on the idea that came before. The idea being that examining these real and fundamental truths, you see they defy reality. Well, some of these truths, and then he chooses one. For instance, for example, that truth regarding the mode of existence in which a poem is there are not difficult to recognize. So he's saying it is not hard to see that we have things that defy this categorization. Yet, meaning in spite of the fact that, meaning in spite of what I just said, it is not difficult to see them, yet there are some intellectually energetic persons on whom, in default of the development in them of any strong interest in poetry, the logic that might have made awareness of the third realm potent in their thought will hardly have much cogency. Let us find the root of that sentence. Okay, yet, which connects it to the previous idea, giving a contrast to follow. There are intellectually energetic persons on whom the logic will hardly have cogency. There are persons on whom the logic lacks cogency. All right, let's make sure we see how everything fits together. Beginning with yet, I'm going to change the words. In spite of the fact that some of these truths are obvious, yet still there are persons on whom the logic lacks cogency. Cogency means a clarity of mind. If someone's logic lacks cogency, it doesn't make sense. So, in spite of the fact that the truth is obvious, yet there are persons to whom it doesn't make sense. That's the heart of this sentence. Let's put in the modifiers to add flesh to the idea. Yet there are intellectually energetic persons. Here, I'm not going to write intellectually energetic. I'm just going to write smart. That's less writing for me. But he said intellectually energetic. They have plenty of power in their brains. Yet, in spite of the fact that the truth is obvious, they cannot see it. They deny it. Okay? Yet, there are intellectually energetic persons on whom, here we need something. In default of the development in them of any strong interest in poetry. Now that is a very strange thing to put in that sentence. Because in default of means if these intellectually energetic people never develop an interest in poetry, then the logic will lack cogency. And I was thinking of scientists. I think he is really speaking about materialistic, atheistic scientists. Most of them, you would think, would not be interested in poetry. Poetry, for them, is not in the realm of study. It's something they think we don't need to study. They practically think it doesn't exist, or it is the emotional, not junk food, but an indulgence of emotional lack of discipline. So they have no respect for poetry. So I don't think of poetry in the same thought that I think of these persons. But what he is saying is there are persons who don't develop an interest in poetry on whom the logic lacks cogency. The logic that might have made awareness of the third realm potent in their thought will lack cogency. Okay, so this describes the logic. The logic that might have made awareness of the third realm potent in their thought. Okay, might have made. It's contrary to fact. They had no interest in poetry, so it didn't operate on them. But if they had had interest in poetry, the interest might have made awareness of the third realm potent in their thought. In other words, the existence of a third realm lacks cogency for them now, but if they developed the interest in poetry, it might have occurred to them that the poem exists in a way which cannot be defined in scientific terms as public, nor can it be fully pushed aside as merely private. Okay. So, the logic that might have made awareness of the third realm potent in their thought. Potent. What do we think of when we think of the word potent? It's very close to a word we have in English, impotent. By the way, the pronunciation of this word is impotent. Impotent. The pronunciation of this by itself is potent. Potent. There's another word that's closely related. Potentate. A potentate is a king or a very powerful man. So let's think what the word potent means. In one sense, it means in this context it would have given life. it would have been a seminal idea. The word seminal is also very close to the word potent. In the literal meanings in English, if someone is potent, he is capable of becoming the father of a child. And there's a close connection with the word seminal, with the same types of roots, root meaning. So, if someone is impotent, he is incapable of becoming a father. If someone is a potentate, he is powerful to do things in the lives of people. A seminal idea is an idea which gives birth to many other ideas. Like Abraham was the father of nations. A seminal idea gives birth to big ideas. One moment, please. So the choice of the word potent in their thought suggests that as it is now, their thought is barren. No children. Barrenness means it has no babies, no children. As of now, these people can think of only naturalistic reality, and they don't really believe in supernatural reality. If they developed an interest in poetry, the idea of a third realm might have occurred to them, and that idea would be seminal and give birth to lots of other ideas. So that word is kind of important in this sentence. So let me reread. I think I'll reread the whole paragraph. And if you have any questions about any phrases or words or concepts, send them to us on the chat board or an email if you're watching this not live. And when I finish reading this paragraph, I'll move on. So any questions, send them now. Okay, I'm going to reread. We'll put all the pieces together. I am afraid that I fail to satisfy in all this the criterion of logical and clear, though to me my logic seems all right. But the complexities and subtleties of the real and fundamental must sometimes be considered closely and in depth. And it turns out that they tend to defy the rationality of either or. Some, indeed, of the essential defiant truths, for instance, that regarding the mode of existence in which a poem is there, are not difficult to recognize. Yet, there are intellectually energetic persons on whom, in default of the development in them of any strong interest in poetry, the logic that might have made awareness of the third realm potent in their thought will hardly have much cogency. So, Levis is worried that he is not fulfilling some people's expectation of either or rationality, but he points out that the existence of a third realm is obvious, even though some smart people can't see it. Perhaps if they had developed an interest in poetry, they might have been able to see it, and it would have given rise in their mind to a whole new world of ideas. That's my paraphrase of this paragraph. Moving on, I'll read. Such persons might be asked to consider the nature and mode of existence of a language, of the language in which they write and think. For not only do they express their thought in it, without a language they would be incapable of thought. Where is the English language? You can't point to it, and the perusal of a linguistician's treatise will do nothing to help you towards an answer to such questions. It is concretely there, only as I utter the words and phrases chosen by the meaning, in me, but outwardly bound, which they convey, and you take them. But that, of course, is only, as it were, a hint at the nature of an intelligently unsatisfactory answer, which is what, at best, one could hope to achieve. I might, at the end of a seminar, say, it was there in the crisscross of utterance between us. But that, too, would only be another hint. Still, we all have an intimate acquaintance with the nature of linguistic communication, and such hints should be enough to elicit from an intelligent but non-literary person the recognition that thought about human affairs is grievously disabled if the thinker feels bound by a logic that takes either public or private to be an exhaustive antithesis, one offering alternatives that are sufficient for the distinctions one needs to make. Let's look at it again. Such persons, who are we talking about? Well, the persons in the paragraph immediately before are the persons who lack the ability to see the existence of a third realm. Those are the persons in question. Such persons might be asked to consider the nature and mode of existence of a language, of the language in which they write and think. He is saying that if we have these people who are blind to the existence of something which is obvious, and they deny it, they say it doesn't exist, well, we can ask them, what about the nature and mode of existence of a language? Because they concede that language exists. So ask them, where does it exist? And in what manner does it exist? How does it exist? This is the kind of question which will be very hard to answer if you insist upon a worldview in which either public or private is taken to be an exhaustive antithesis. Exhaustive means everything is in the set. It means comprehensive. Antithesis means a separation. If it is this, then it is not that. If it is this, then it is not that. And an exhaustive antithesis would find everything in one category or the other. If your worldview is that of the naturalistic, atheistic scientist, which most people in modern culture would claim that worldview, it is the secular humanist worldview, then you have only two choices. Something exists literally and materially, in the public realm, or it exists privately as some kind of a value judgment, which is outside the realm of consideration of science. So, a person with that worldview will find it very difficult to answer the question, where is language? Clearly, it's not only in our head privately, but it's very difficult to point to it in terms of pinning it down to a location. Such persons might be asked to consider the nature and mode of existence of a language, of the language in which they write and think. For not only do they express their thought in it, without a language they would be incapable of thought. So it's the operating language for their brain, just as MS-DOS might be the operating language for a computer. Without it, the computer can't function. Where is the English language? You can't point to it, and the perusal of a linguistician's treatise will do nothing to help you toward an answer to such questions. Someone might consider looking in the work of linguists to find out where language is, but they will not find it. It's a philosophical question, not really a linguistic question. A linguist studies language and describes it in terms of its norms and patterns. It does not philosophically question how it exists philosophically. It is concretely there. What does the word it refer to in this sentence? It is concretely there only as I utter the words and phrases chosen by the meaning. It refers to language. Language is concretely there only as I utter the words and phrases chosen by the meaning. So, as I am speaking, language is present. You could describe the words and sounds I am making, the patterns. A linguist could analyze the words and patterns as I am speaking. It is concretely there at that moment. It can be measured by devices at that moment, but only at that moment, as I utter the words and phrases chosen by the meaning in me, but outward bound. That's the private dimension. The idea is in me. The idea, the meaning, is not yet in the third realm. The meaning is in my mind privately. I connect it to words. The meaning is the selection criterion connected to words, and out it goes into a material existence which is instantaneous and brief. The meaning is carried on the words. Where does the meaning go when the echo of the words dies down? Is the meaning gone? No, the meaning is still there. So, as I utter the words and phrases chosen by me, in me, but outwardly bound, which they convey, and you take them. Okay, so this parenthetical, in me but outwardly bound, gets in the way of our understanding the sentence. So I'm going to get rid of it and read without it. It, meaning language, is concretely there only as I utter the words and phrases chosen by the meaning which they convey. So they is words and sounds. Chosen by the meaning which they convey, and you take them. So the them either refers to the sounds or it refers to the meaning. or both. It seems to me that the meaning begins in my mind, it is attached to words and sounds, it goes across the airwaves and into your ear, still carrying the meaning, and then the meaning takes up residence in your mind as the sound dies away. So it seems to me that the language is the vehicle. But this is thinking in a little more depth of the nature of the existence of language. Next sentence. But that, of course, is only, as it were, a hint at the nature of an intelligently unsatisfactory answer, which is what, at best, one could hope to achieve. An answer. To what question? The question is, where is language? This preceding sentence about it being concretely there only as I am speaking is a hint at an unsatisfactory answer to the question. Where is language? It is there as you are speaking. Well, in what sense is it there? It is only a hint. When I say it is there when I am speaking, I am not clearly answering the question, where is language? By pointing to the space in between you and me, in between my mouth and your ear, that is where language is? No, that would be an unsatisfactory answer, even if it were true, even if it were a full answer. But just to say it is there is only a hint. You must take that and think more deeply to get any answer at all. And when you get that answer, which you can get from thinking of the hint, the answer will be unsatisfactory. Where is language? It is there when I speak. No, that is not a comprehensive, complete answer. As it were, a hint at the nature of an intelligently unsatisfactory answer, which is what, at best, one could hope to achieve. An unsatisfactory answer is what, at best, one could hope to achieve. At best means the best answer you could ever hope to give will still be unsatisfactory to the question of where is language. If you are interested in more discussion of any phrases in a sentence, please let me know. As I'm reading, I see things that I think you may wonder about. For example, in this particular sentence that we just read, but that, of course, is only, as it were, a hint at the nature of an intelligently unsatisfactory answer. There were 5 phrases, all of which to a native speaker convey some sense of secondary meaning about the emotions of the speaker. And I'm not sure you get the importance of each of them, but none of them are crucial to the core meaning of the sentence. The core meaning of the sentence being that when one asks, where is language? One might say, it is only concretely present when you are actually speaking, because you're speaking to someone for whom the concrete is all there is. So, for you, if you only want to know concrete, it is concretely present when I'm speaking. That's the core meaning. But these little phrases, but that, of course, is only, as it were, a hint at the nature of an intelligently unsatisfactory answer, which is what, at best, one could hope to achieve. It has a lot of unclear phrases for you, I think. If you want more discussion, let me know, because we could take it apart. I just don't want to waste time on things that aren't really very pertinent to the core meaning. Also, they're hard to explain. Okay, so let me know if you want something. I'll go on. And by the way, if you are watching this on not live, just downloaded form, you can always send emails, and even if you are 10 lessons behind, we'll talk about a phrase. So feel free to communicate. Okay, I'm beginning to read at the second to last line, where it begins with the words, I might. I might, at the end of a seminar, say, it was there, in the crisscross of an utterance between us. But that, too, would be only another hint. Okay, we are still answering the question, where is language? Levis might, at the end of a seminar, say, language was there in my seminar. In the crisscross is this. In the crisscross of utterance between us. Utterance is speech. I speak, you speak, I speak, you speak. In that network of sentences, of sounds, shape of mouth and air, there was language. But again, that too would only be a hint at where language is, and an unsatisfactory one, because language is really not in the concrete realm. The concrete realm, where you can point to it and say it is there. Still, we all have an intimate acquaintance with the nature of linguistic communication. Still means in spite of what went before. Again, what went before was hopelessness. We have a question to which a satisfactory answer cannot be conceived. Still, or you might say, yet, we all know the answer. In our hearts, we have an intimate acquaintance with the nature of linguistic communication. That means if a little girl knows how to jump rope, she's jumping, she's jumping, she's jumping, she's jumping. She may not know the physics of the curve of the rope, the speed, the arch, the fact that the rope slaps the ground in front of her foot, not behind or under. She may not know the rhythm she must maintain between jumping and twirling. She may not be able to describe it in mathematical terms, yet she can jump rope. She has an intimate acquaintance with the process. She can do it. She can recognize it, even if she cannot explain it in a satisfactory manner. We also have an intimate acquaintance with linguistic communication, even though we cannot describe in terms a physicist could understand about the wavelength of our speech, or terms a linguist would understand about the shape of our mouth and the position of our tongue and the closure of our teeth when we make the sounds. We cannot describe it as a scientist, yet we have an intimate acquaintance. We know it. We recognize it. We can do it. We understand verbal communication, linguistic communication. And such hints as, it's there when I speak, it's there in the crisscross of utterance between you and me, such hints should be enough to elicit from an intelligent but non-literary person the recognition that thought about human affairs is grievously disabled if the thinker feels himself bound by a logic that takes either public or private to be an exhaustive antithesis, one offering alternatives that are sufficient for the distinctions one needs to make. We all have an intimate acquaintance with the nature of linguistic communication, and such hints should be enough to elicit from an intelligent but non-literary person the recognition that thought about human affairs is disabled if one is bound by logic. Remember, one paragraph ago, Levis pointed out that some people cannot recognize the existence of a third realm because they do not appreciate poetry. And if they had appreciated poetry, it would have given rise to the idea that a third realm exists. Then he said, if you have such a person, ask him about the nature of language. And now he says, this should be enough to elicit from him a recognition of the fact that his thought is disabled by insistence on an either or world in which something is either non-material and private or public and able to be described sufficiently by science. Any questions on that paragraph? Because I will move on to the third paragraph if you're good with this. And if you have any thoughts, email them to me over the week. We'll talk about them again next week. But we will move on to a third paragraph right now. Okay, I am reading from page 38. First full paragraph. It's new ground for us. I haven't read it yet to you. One moment. A mind as good as Andreski's might be led by these considerations not merely to take the force of the point about the way in which the poem is there, but more generally to see that full recognition of the third realm and its nature is necessary to the kind of thought to which his book commits him. In no other way can he escape the contradictions and inconsistencies, his suspicion of which he betrays here and there. But full recognition means training and habituation, and Andreski's training has enabled him to dismiss this has enabled him to dismiss in this offhand way the contemporary who had the most to teach him. Quote, Manchester University made an interesting experiment when, at his own request, it converted Michael Poliani's post in chemistry into a chair of social studies, expecting perhaps that he would replicate his discoveries in a new field. which, as you might guess, did not happen. Page 199. Okay, we're still talking about Andreski's book, The Knower and the Known. Knowing and Being, actually. Well, The Knower and the Known is the title of the book. In that book, Andreski calls the scientists to account for their failure to abide by certain ethical rules that bind sociologists. Yet, Andreski gives credence to the assumption that the humanistic worldview, the naturalistic worldview, is correct. And within the naturalistic worldview, the ethics have no power. The ethics he is calling his colleagues to live up to have no value. And Andreski himself reveals that he is uncomfortable with his position as preacher, or as whistleblower, or as moralist. He reveals that he is uncomfortable with this, probably because he is somewhat aware that his worldview makes no room for these types of value judgments. Yet, in his heart, he knows they exist. He functions in the third realm the way all human beings do, even though his training makes him blind to it. So, we are back to Andreski. A mind as good as Andreski's might be led by these considerations. What considerations? The consideration of where language exists, the consideration of where poetry exists, that we've been talking about all along. A mind as good as Andreski's might be led by these considerations, not merely to take the force of the point about the way in which the poem is there, but more generally to see that full recognition of the third realm and its nature is necessary to the kind of thought to which his book commits him. So, as soon as he discovers that a poem has a peculiar form of existence in the public and private realm, then he might generalize to say, well then, a third realm must exist. And at that point, he would see, perhaps, that it is the missing link in his argument. It is that which he is lacking, and he feels uncomfortable with his role because he is functioning in the third realm as a moralist. So as soon as he discovers the existence of a third realm, he might see that it is necessary to the kind of thought to which his book commits him. His book commits him to a moralistic kind of thought, and this realm is where it exists. In no other way can he escape the contradictions and inconsistencies, his suspicion of which he betrays here and there. In no other way can he account for his identity as a moralist, other than to concede the existence of a moral realm, a third realm. His inconsistencies and contradictions will make him uncomfortable until he concedes that point. But full recognition means training and habituation. You and I are being trained to recognize the various modes of existence of the things around us, both the concrete objects and the moral concepts, abstract concepts, and even the private bursts of thought which are only our own. We are being trained and making a habit of it. But those who are trained and make a habit of believing that the only reality is that which can be explained chemically and through the laws of physics, their training and habituation leads them to attempt to account for everything in terms of physics. So, full recognition of the third realm means training and habituation. And Andreski's training has enabled him to dismiss, in this offhand way, the contemporary who had the most to teach him, Michael Poliani. He dismisses him in an offhand way when he writes this quote. Now I'll read the whole quote again and try to get the feeling. To dismiss something in an offhand way means to dismiss it without even considering it, to dismiss it almost without looking at it, to assume it is false before you consider it. It is to dismiss it casually. So see if you can feel the offhand way that he is dismissing Michael Poliani in this quote. Manchester University made an interesting experiment when, at his own request, it converted Michael Poliani's post in chemistry to a chair of social studies, expecting perhaps he would replicate his discoveries in a new field, which, as you might guess, did not happen. I think he's saying that chemistry is a hard science, and Poliani couldn't be expected to make that kind of hard discovery in the field of social studies. Perhaps, maybe, well, I'm not sure why. Because, see, Andreski himself is a social scientist, so you wouldn't think he would disrespect social studies, so I'm not sure. But anyway, this sentence is supposed to illustrate an offhand dismissal of Poliani. Perhaps if we read more of Poliani's actual work, we would see what Levis is pointing at, that Andreski has much to learn from Poliani. Probably Poliani talks about this third realm. But it did not happen. I'm going to read on, but we will probably not finish this next paragraph because it's long. And we have, not too much time left. But I'm going to read on. I hadn't thought of either of the two essays of Poliani's, to which I send my pupils first, as falling under social studies. But certainly real attention paid to sense-giving and sense-reading, along with the logic of tacit inference, both in knowing and being, might have brought home to Andreski that social, in the use of the word he consistently endorses, is essentially and insidiously reductive, devitalizing, as it does, the supremely important concept of society. It might, at any rate, have induced some uneasiness in him when, in writing, for example, the following, he had to recognize how habitually he had presented the reader with much the same kind of choice, a choice offered as one between real thought on the one hand and undisciplined self-indulgence or emotionality on the other. Quote, nonetheless, the great Cartesian tradition of clear and logical thinking has withered and made room for a predilection for mystification, page 208. But that would have involved his having registered that Poliani had attacked the Cartesian dualism, on which the ideal of logic and clarity depends. With all the formidableness of a subtle mind that was both profoundly original and rigorously trained, attacked it out of a training very different from that of which I make myself an advocate in this book, and with an approach very different from mine. A basic assumption of Andreski's is that the Cartesian dualism is unassailable, having been established for good. Do you want to go into ripping this thing apart, or should we pause now?
So, I think we could go on at least. We could go on and read a
Okay.
little bit more.
All right. I hadn't thought of either of the two essays of Polanyi's to which I send my pupils first as falling under social studies. Okay, apparently, Levis sends his pupils to read essays of Polanyi at the beginning of studies. So Levis believes that these essays have value for the kind of education that Levis is doing. And he wasn't thinking that they were social studies. I suppose he was thinking of them as faithful to the nature of reality. And so he sends his students to read these essays because they are helpful in the track of education Levis has the students on. As such, they would be helpful for Andreski to read if he had not dismissed Polanyi out of hand. They would help to train Andreski's mind to break out of the blinders of the Cartesian either-or dualism which Andreski is stuck in. So Andreski could have been greatly benefited by Polanyi if he had read these two essays. So I hadn't thought of these essays as falling under social studies, but certainly real attention paid to, and now we have the title of an essay, quote, sense giving and sense reading. By the way, I believe those two essays talk about taking the sense of something as opposed to the literal words. So it looks at the fact that meaning rides upon words, but the words are not the full meaning. Do you see? It talks about meaning overtones, alternate meanings. I believe that's what that means. Okay. So, real attention paid to sense giving and sense reading, that essay, along with the logic of tacit inference. Tacit inference means inferring meaning. That means drawing meaning that is not directly stated. Drawing meaning from tacit inference. Tacit means that it was not explicit. It was actually not said. I'll give you an example. If your wife is slamming doors and washing the dishes real hard, and she puts a dish down and it breaks, and then she grabs another dish and starts washing it and puts it down and it breaks, and you say to her, "How are you?" And she says, "Fine," breaks another dish. You might infer that she is angry, even though she clearly and explicitly stated that she was fine. So, the logic of tacit inference. Polanyi has written an essay. And again, a computer listening to the exchange would say the woman is fine, because that is what she said. But a human being can receive input above the literal meaning of the words. And this is part of our ability to use language in a third realm. Excuse me. Okay, so the logic of tacit inference. Both of these essays are in knowing, or both of these concepts are in the essay entitled Knowing and Being. I don't believe these are actually essays. I think they're concepts in an essay entitled Knowing and Being. Okay, I hope you are still there. We are having a terrible storm outside here, and a bolt of lightning must have hit because we lost power. But we are back now. Let's see, where were we? Okay, we were talking about the concepts of sense giving and sense reading and the logic of tacit inference, which I think are concepts rather than essay titles. Anyway, this is a complex sentence, so I'm going to reread it again. I hadn't thought of either of the two essays of Poliani's, to which I send my pupils first, as falling under social studies, but certainly real attention paid to sense giving and sense reading, along with the logic of tacit inference, might have brought home to Andreski that the word social, in the use of the word he consistently endorses, is essentially and insidiously reductive, devitalizing as it does the supremely important concept of society. Andreski uses the word social in a way which is reductive. Keep in mind, this is philosophically reductive. Andreski is a social scientist. He should know the meaning of the word social more than Levis should know the meaning. However, Levis is speaking in a different realm. Levis is understanding society in its third realm definition, where Andreski is considering the word society in its public definition. In a public understanding of society, something that can be measured by instruments, that would be the enumeration of individuals who actually exist, and perhaps the norms and laws of the group in which a person lives. But for Levis, the third realm understanding of society transcends the actual enumeration. It goes all the way back in history, and it takes into account all of the interventions which have shaped life. It takes into account all of the ideas which have illumined human existence from the beginning of time. And even in the snapshot of now, it understands society in a way that defies the either-or Cartesian understanding of public and private. So, consideration of these concepts of sense-giving, sense-taking, and sense-reading, and the logic of tacit inference should have been seminal for Andreski, except that he is trained and habitually accustomed to thinking with blinders, to thinking as something that's naturalistic or something that's emotional. So, these concepts might have brought home to Andreski. Bring home to Andreski means convince him, bring it to his attention, and make him see the reality. That's what it means to bring something home to you. So it might have brought home to Andreski that social, in the use of the word he consistently endorses, i.e. in his naturalistic use, is essentially and insidiously reductive. What does it mean to be reductive? If a train of thought is what we call reductionistic or reductionist, it means it is simplistic. Simplistic. Simple-istic. That means it is made more simple than it is. For example, in America, if I say the black people should study, go to school, and then they'll get a good job. The only reason we white people have most of the good jobs is because we worked for it. Those lazy black people could have a good job just like me if they would only go to school and study and work for it. That is reductionistic because it doesn't take into consideration real factors. It is in fact so reductionistic that it is not even true. Many black people, if they studied hard and went to school, would not end up getting a good job. They might end up getting killed. Because in their culture, to act white is to put yourself above others. And the violent gang members do not like that. And they have been known to kidnap and drag away a black student who tries to stay clean and study. Drag him away, beat